Okay, so if I asked you to point to the part of your body that decides your personality,
Mm.
specifically, how brave you are or how willing you are to roll the dice on a risky decision,
Mm.
where would you point?
Well, instinctively, I'd point to my head.
Right.
Probably right here, the forehead. That's where the frontal cortex is. The brain CEO. The decision maker.
Exactly. That's
Yeah.
the intuitive answer.
Yeah.
Now, what if I asked you to point to the part of your body that controls how fast you burn calories
Yeah.
or how much heat you generate, your general energy level?
I'd point to my throat. The thyroid gland?
The thyroid.
Yeah, the master regulator of metabolism.
Okay, so let's unpack this a little.
Mm.
Because the common wisdom is that those are two totally separate things. You've got the CEO in the brain making these complex choices, and then you have the furnace down in the basement,
Right.
just shoveling coal to keep the lights on.
Neurology versus endocrinology. They're two different doctors, two different textbooks.
But here is the curveball, and this is where it gets really, really interesting. What if I told you that for your body to function correctly, those two things, the CEO and the furnace, are actually the same system?
Uh-huh.
What if the hormone that's made of your throat is traveling up to your brain, breaking into the control room, and literally rewriting the genetic code of your personality to, like, turn you into an explorer?
That is exactly what we are unpacking today. And it sounds like science fiction, maybe a little bit like biological determinism, but it's really it's evolutionary biology at its finest.
We're doing a deep dive into this fascinating paper called Thyroid Hormone Remodels Cortex to Coordinate Body-Wide Metabolism and Exploration.
Yeah.
It was in Cell. And honestly, it just completely upends the way you think about why we do what we do.
It really does, because, we usually think of the thyroid as just a thermostat.
Yeah, turn up the heat.
Turn up the heat, you burn more energy. Turn it down, you gain weight, you get tired. But this research shows that thyroid hormone, specifically the active form, ET3, does something so much more profound in the adult brain.
It's not just keeping the lights on.
No, it's actually rewiring the whole house.
No.
The central idea here is coordination. If your body is revving up its engine, burning way more energy, you can't just sit on the couch.
You'd run out of fuel.
You physically need to go find fuel. So the thyroid doesn't just tell the body to burn fat. It tells the brain to go find food.
And to do that, it has to change how we make decisions.
Yeah.
It shifts us from sticking to what we know to exploring the unknown.
Exactly. And that shift from safety to risk is what we're going to get into today.
So before we get into the heavy genetics and the brain surgery part of this study, which is wild, let's set the stage with the why. The researchers bring up this incredible example from nature, the Madagascar gray mouse lemur.
Yes, the mouse lemur is the perfect protagonist for this whole story. It gives us that evolutionary context we need. So just picture Madagascar. You've got these really distinct seasons.
Right.
In the wet season, resources are just booming. There's fruit everywhere, insects, everything is abundant.
A buffet out there.
It really is. And physiologically, the lemurs respond to this. Their thyroid hormone levels surge. Their metabolism jumps. They start eating 4 times as much food as they do in the dry season.
4 times. Wow.
Yeah, their whole internal engine is just racing.
Okay, so they're bulking up. But they don't just eat more and stay put in their safe little trees.
No, and this is the absolute key. Their behavior changes completely. Specifically the males, and we can get to the sex differences later, but the males expand their territory.
Okay.
They start foraging much, much further from home. They start looking for mates. They become effectively explorers.
They become risk takers.
High risk. The mortality rate for them actually goes up during this season because they're out in the open exposing themselves to predators. But biologically, it makes perfect sense.
How so?
If your metabolism is skyrocketing, you're a high-performance machine. You need a massive amount of fuel. If you stay in your safe little burrow, you will literally starve to death because your body is burning energy too fast. You have to explore.
So the big question for this study was basically, is this behavior change just a side effect of feeling energetic? Like, oh, I had a triple espresso, so I'm jittery.
Exactly.
Or is the thyroid hormone itself instructing the brain to change its whole operating system?
Is the brain just reacting to a racing heart, or is the hormone talking directly to the neurons? And spoiler alert, it is a direct line of communication.
Okay, let's get into the mechanism, because this is where it gets really technical, but so cool. This study focused on the frontal cortex, specifically a region called M2. Why there?
So M2 is the secondary motor cortex. It's heavily involved in planning action and making decisions about movement. It's not just the part that moves your leg, it's the part that decides where to move your leg next.
The
The
strategist.
strategist. And what the researchers found is that T3, that active thyroid hormone, it crosses the blood-brain barrier, goes into these cells, and binds to nuclear receptors.
And when you say nuclear receptors, you mean it goes right to the DNA.
Right to the source code. It binds to the DNA and it changes gene expression. They call these thyroid responsive genes, or TRGs. So it's not just tweaking the volume on something, it's turning on entirely different programs.
It wasn't doing the same thing to every cell, right? It seemed like it had a different message for different players in the brain.
That was one of the most surprising findings. It's a very tailored message. So let's look at the glutamatergic neurons. These are your main excitatory neurons, the ones sending the go signals.
Ones that make things happen.
Yeah. In these neurons, T3 turned on genes related to axon-guidance.
Axon-guidance. Wait, isn't that something that happens when you're an embryo and your brain is first growing?
Precisely. That's the aha moment right there. One gene they highlighted is called ROBO3. ROBO3 is crucial during development to help neurons find their way, to make the right connections. Usually in adults, this system is quiet. The wiring's done.
But T3 turns this gene back on.
It turns it back on.
So the adult brain, under the influence of this hormone, is acting like a developing brain. It's physically looking for new connections.
Yes. It enters a state of high plasticity. It's becoming malleable again. It's like the brain is saying, the old maps aren't working for this high energy state. We need to build new roads.
And it wasn't just the neurons, right? The support staff got a memo too.
Correct. T3 also talks to the oligodendrocytes. These are the cells that wrap around the nerves to insulate them. That insulation is called myelin.
Okay.
T3 triggers genes to ramp up myelination.
Which is basically like upgrading the internet speed of the brain.
That's a perfect way to put it. Better insulation means faster signal transmission. And then you have the astrocytes, the caretakers. And interestingly, T3 tells them to downregulate the transporters that bring the hormone in.
Wait, so it tells them to stop bringing the hormone in?
It's probably a negative feedback loop, like a safety valve, to prevent an overdose in those specific cells. But at the same time, the astrocytes upregulate genes for synapse maintenance, so the whole ecosystem of the frontal cortex is being remodeled to support new connections and faster signaling.
Okay, so we have the genes turning on, we have the brain entering this plastic kind of malleable state. But how does that translate to actual electricity? Because, I mean, in the end, a brain is just sparks, right?
Right. So the researchers did electrophysiology. They measured the electrical signals in these neurons after the T3 treatment, and they found that the neurons became sensitized.
Sensitized how?
Well, imagine a trigger on a camera. Normally, you have to press it down halfway to focus, then all the way to snap the picture. T3 made it so you barely have to touch the button.
Ah.
Technically, it reduced the amount of input required to get a half maximum response.
So the neurons are basically trigger happy.
They're primed to fire. But here is the critical part, and this proves it's a direct effect. They did an experiment called the mosaic experiment.
This was the one with the dominant negative receptor, right? I tried to wrap my head around this.
It sounds complicated, but the logic is beautiful. They used a virus to infect only some neurons with a broken thyroid receptor. This receptor, it sits on the DNA, but it can't listen to the hormone.
So it's like putting earplugs in specific cells.
Exactly.
So you have a brain where some neighbors can hear the command and some are deaf to it.
A perfect mosaic pattern. And they found that the changes in synaptic transmission, that trigger-happy state, it only happened if the sending neuron, the presynaptic one, had a working receptor.
Wow. So the hormone isn't just floating around changing the whole vibe. It is giving a specific order to the sender. Change how you talk to your neighbor.
And if the sender has the earplugs in, the order is ignored, and that circuit doesn't change. This proves definitively that the hormone is directly instructing the circuitry of the brain. It's not a wash, it's a targeted command.
That is wild. It's molecular command and control. Okay, but let's bring it out of the microscope and into the cage. How does this rewiring actually look in an animal? We talked about the lemurs exploring, but how do you test that in a lab mouse?
You use the classic light-dark box test. It's pretty much exactly what it sounds like. It's a box where half is pitch black and safe, and the other half is brightly lit and exposed.
And mice are nocturnal prey animals. They hate the light.
They are terrified of it, yeah. Normal mouse will just stick to the dark, maybe poke its nose out for a second. But when they treated these male mice with T3, everything changed.
What happened?
They spent significantly more time in the lit area.
Were they just, like, running around like maniacs? Were they just hyperactive?
That's the first thing you'd check, right? This is just the jittery coffee effect we talked about.
Right.
But no, their total movement didn't change. They weren't running more. They were just running where they usually wouldn't. They were braver. They were exploring the dangerous zone.
Now, you mentioned male mice specifically.
Yeah.
Was there a difference with the females?
There was, and this mirrors the lemur story. In the lemurs, it's the males that go out and expand territory. In this study, when they gave T3 to female mice, they did not see this same increase in light zone exploration, at least not in this specific test.
That's a really important distinction. It suggests this whole mechanism is sexually dimorphic. It works differently in males and females.
It does, and it aligns with the evolutionary roles, at least in that species. But there's another control experiment here that I think is the most important one in the whole paper. It's the soboturamine test.
Soboturam, okay, that's the drug that mimics thyroid hormone, right?
It mimics it, but with a huge catch. It works on the liver, the heart, the muscles, but it cannot cross the blood-brain barrier.
Oh.
It's either too big or it just doesn't get transported in.
So it's the perfect way to test if the behavior is coming from the body or from the brain.
Exactly. If you give a mouse soboturam, its metabolism goes way up. Its liver starts burning fat, its heart might change pace. Physiologically, its body is screaming high energy, but the brain sees nothing.
And the result?
The behavior didn't change at all. They stayed in the dark box.
Wow. So even if your body is racing, even if your metabolism's on fire, if that hormone doesn't actually touch the frontal cortex, you do not become an explorer.
That is the smoking gun. The bravery isn't a side effect of the metabolism. The bravery is a separate, parallel command sent directly to the brain to coordinate with the metabolism.
That is so cool. It really just shows that the brain and body aren't these separate entities. They're constantly syncing up.
They have to. If you have a Ferrari engine, a high metabolism, but you drive it like a golf cart low exploration, you're just going to run out of gas.
But the researchers didn't stop at bravery. Because exploration isn't just about running into the light, it's cognitive. It's about how you process information.
Right. Bravery is simple, strategy is complex, so they used a test called the two-armed bandit.
Which sounds like a bad casino game.
It basically is. It comes from probability theory. You know, slot machines are one-armed bandits. In this case, imagine a thirsty mouse. It has two water spouts. Spout A gives water 80% of the time. Spout B only gives water 20% of the time.
So obviously you figure that out pretty quick. You just keep hitting spout A.
That strategy is called exploitation. You exploit the resource you know works, it's efficient, it's safe. But, and here's the trick, without warning, the researchers switch the rules. Suddenly, spout A is dry and spout B becomes the 80% winner.
So the mouse hits spout A, gets nothing. Hits it again, gets nothing. What does it do?
That is the question. A rigid thinker, someone stuck in their ways, will keep hitting spout A thinking, it worked before, it has to work, maybe just one more try.
We've all been there.
We have. But an explorer realizes the world has changed and goes to test the other option.
And the T3 mice.
They switched so much faster. The data showed they were significantly more likely to switch spouts after just 2 consecutive failures.
2 strikes and they're out.
Exactly. Whereas the control mice, the ones with normal thyroid levels, they would just keep trying the old spout for longer. The T3 mice were cognitively flexible. They shifted from exploitation to exploration much more readily.
And they modeled this mathematically too, didn't they? With something called Q learning.
Yes, and I promise not to bore you with the calculus. But there is a parameter in these models called beta.
Beta.
And beta essentially represents stickiness or rigidity. If you have a high beta, you always choose the thing you think is best. You don't gamble, you're deterministic.
And T3 lowered the beta.
It lowered the beta significantly. It made their decision-making policy more probabilistic. It made the mice say, hey, maybe I should check that other option, just in case.
Which brings us all the way back to that evolutionary logic. If you are starving, or if your metabolism is racing and you need food now, sticking to a dried-up food source is fatal. You need to lower your beta. You need to gamble on the new territory.
Precisely. It's safer to risk the unknown than it is to starve in the known.
So let's try to put this all together. Let's trace the whole path from Madagascar to the molecules.
Okay, let's do it. So, step 1, an environmental cue. The wet season, a metabolic shift, whatever. Thyroid hormone levels rise in the blood.
Step 2. The active hormone, T3, travels to the brain, crosses the blood-brain barrier, and gets into the neurons of the frontal cortex.
Step 3. It goes to the nucleus and rewrites the instructions. It turns on developmental genes like Robo3. It tells the brain, time to change.
Step 4. The cells physically change. They get sensitized, trigger-happy. The wiring gets insulated by oligodendrocytes to speed everything up.
And finally, step 5. The behavior shifts. The animal stops sticking to its safe habits. It becomes willing to enter the light. It becomes willing to switch strategies instantly if resources fail. It becomes an explorer.
It coordinates the internal need for energy with the external behavior required to get it.
It's a beautiful, elegant feedback loop. It ensures that the animal doesn't burn out its engine while it's idling in the garage.
You know, this really makes me think about humans. We always talk about metabolism and personality as these totally different buckets. You go to an endocrinologist for your thyroid, and you go to a therapist for your anxiety or your impulsivity.
But the clinical data hints that they are connected. I mean, we know that people with hyperthyroidism, too much T3, often have mania. They're restless. They take risks. Their thoughts race.
Over-exploration.
Exactly. And people with hypothyroidism, too, little T3, often experience depression. They have low motivation. They don't want to try new things. They get stuck.
Under-exploration.
Right. And for a long time, we thought, oh, well, they're depressed because they feel tired and heavy. And that's true. But this study suggests it might be deeper. The lack of hormone might literally be keeping their brain circuits in a rigid, non-plastic state.
It really makes you wonder. We tend to think of our personality, our willingness to try a new restaurant, or quit a job, or travel to a new country, as us, as our soul or our character.
But how much of that character is actually just the current setting of our metabolic thermostat?
That is a slightly terrifying but fascinating thought. It makes you realize how integrated we truly are. We aren't a brain piloting a meat suit. We are a unified system.
We are. And in a world of information overload, it's worth remembering that sometimes the urge to explore doesn't come from a logical thought. It comes from a molecule in your throat telling you to go find something new.
Well, on that note, I think I'm going to go get my thyroid checked before I make any major life decisions.
Probably a safe bet.
Thanks for listening to this deep dive into the thyroid-brain connection. We'll catch you on the next one.
Keep exploring.